don't understand that the GOP doesn't make crime the number one focus, and just the dissolution of our cities under the just massive tidal wave of crime that's broken out since the summer of George, and then illegal immigration. It seems like those are two very solid vote winners, and inflation number three. But the GOP has chosen to make inflation the number one issue, and I think crime, that's my sense of things, that the country is spiraling out of control with this massive murder, rape, and rampage crisis that has spilled out into traffic fatalities, pedestrian deaths, all sorts of horrible statistics are spiraling upwards since the summer of George. I would think the GOP would make that their number one issue.
You bring up the summer of George, and not to get too far into the past, but it is interesting because the George Floyd thing basically was like a religious sacrament. You saw people creating shrines to him, people engaging in vigils, doing all these things that people would do basically to venerate a persecuted saint. And the obviously violent nature of the summer of George can't be overlooked. But there was like a bizarre spiritual component to it as well for a lot of people on the left. It's like he became the patron saint of wokeism, which I do consider to be an organized religion, just not a supernatural one, even though it does bleed into organized supernatural religions in the United States, most notably Christianity, where every major Christian denomination has been captured by the woke folks to some degree. Luke, anyway, anything to say about this spiritual element of wokeism?
Yeah, I think much of life is a spiral. I mean, you're either spiraling up or you're spiraling down. And so to be a liberal is to be perpetually distressed by ever new manifestations of ignorance and bigotry. And so once you take care of one manifestation of ignorance and bigotry by making it completely unacceptable to display publicly, then your job's not done. Now you need to move on to new manifestations of ignorance and bigotry. It's just an eternal cycle. Just like for conservatives, they have an eternal cycle of a fixation on disorder and contagion. So there will never be a point of order and purity where conservatives will say, we're good now. We can just go on with our lives. So I think we're all stuck in spirals. And so for conservatives, they always want an ever more ordered and purified society. And for the left, they always want to combat ignorance. And so George just played into the left-wing need of saying, hey, look how far we have to go to educate Americans away from their woeful ignorance about race and the police. They're just so racist, and our society is just oppressing black people and holding them down, robbing them of opportunities. We need to do better. Without that kind of jihad, there's no energy in liberalism, just like for a Christian, right? Unless he's out there spreading the good news of Jesus Christ, where would he get the energy and enthusiasm? Do you think Christians can be filled with passion if they say, okay, my belief in Jesus is a good path to the transcendent for me, but I don't feel any obligation to share it with anyone else? That would be a Christianity with its balls cut off. And so to an Orthodox Jew who's leading an observant life, if he never felt any compulsion to share the wonders of Jewish observance with another Jew, then he's practicing a type of Judaism with the balls cut off. So we all have this transcendental need for meaning, because at the back of our minds is always this great fear that we're insignificant. And so I stream 5, 10, 20 hours a week to kind of help ward off my own feelings of insignificance, because I'm not married, I don't have kids, so I do my things to ward off a feeling of insignificance. People on the left do their things to ward off a feeling of insignificance. We're all standing here trying to ward off the feeling that our life doesn't matter. And so people get into various crusades or various causes or they push themselves to absurd lengths to try to prove to themselves that their lives matter.
It's interesting though because with the Summer of George, the level to which people devoted themselves to his memory and to whatever cause they perceive as being based on his life, which was hardly a life worth emulating or championing, but whatever. Uh, to me, I did see a level of. It looks obviously like something that comes out of Christianity, being infused into these protests in favor of justice for Floyd, including organized chants, that sort of thing, people reciting verses as to what they believe, so on and so forth. I think that perhaps the Summer of George was a watershed moment in that it marked the beginning of a new public religion.
Yeah, I just don't see it as any different than any other basic attempt for significance. I mean, that's what it is at core. So if I were to lay out to someone who wasn't already a believer the fundamental tenets of Judaism or Islam or the Mormon faith or Roman Catholicism or Seventh-day Adventism, anyone who wasn't already a believer would find it absolutely ridiculous. If I said, oh, the angel Moroni came down here and buried these plates of gold, or that there were these 2 million people who were led through the desert and led through the Red Sea, and God provided food and water for them for 40 years when they lived in the desert, or God sent his only begotten son to come to earth to die on a cross to save you from your sins. Anyone who doesn't already buy into that narrative would find it ridiculous. And so too, anyone who doesn't buy into the liberal narrative about how our great fight is against ignorance and bigotry is going to find these manifestations ridiculous. But every cause looks ridiculous to someone who's not a true believer. I don't think most people realize how much we depend on non-rational sources for our meaning.